Welcome back, everybody, to Selling the Soundtrack, where we break down the music sync licensing industry. If you're already making bangers, your music could be making you bank. Today, we're here with Heather Gardner. She's the head of music supervision and licensing at Vapor Music. She's worked with big brands like IKEA and Joe Fresh. She has also worked with Director X on Robin Hood, and honestly, the list goes on. I could go on forever. Thank you so much for being here, Heather.
Of course. This is going to be fun. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Do you want to share your journey into sync with us?
Sure. I mean, I feel like most people who end up in sync kind of stumble into it in some way, shape, or form. Maybe not so much now, but I feel 15 or so years ago, kind of when I was forging that path. Growing up, I was a classically trained piano player, doing all of that kind of stuff, which I loved and I was good at, but it didn't have my heart in the way that I'm going to be a concert pianist. And like, there was no viable career path for me there, at least not in the way I was interested in. I didn't have the passion to sit 6 to 8 hours in a practice room every day. I went to university for it. I went in expecting I was going to do a performance degree and then realized that anybody who was pursuing that had a level of dedication to it that I very much did not. So, but I always still knew that I loved music and had always been interested in the business side and interested in what makes the industry work and how does that all happen. And had never made the connection that my love for the music that I heard in films and TV shows could be a viable career. I think like every other person who was a teenager at the same time as me, the OC was a huge influence on my love of television music. Having a soundtrack be such an integral part of a TV show was just something that was fascinating, and I learned about so many new bands through that show, whether it was the Killers or them introducing the Bait Shop in whatever season that was, and really featuring the music was something that just piqued my fascination. I went to Western University in London, Ontario, and part of their music program, they have a pop music program. So I got to do courses on music and television, music and gender, got to do courses on punk rock exclusively and on musical theater, and got to really fuel my love of all these different genres and learn more about things. And one of my professors at the time said to me, "You should look into music supervision." To which I kind of half rolled my eyes and said, "I'm going to work at a label and I'm going to," because what else was there? You just didn't know. I think not being a part of the industry, you see record labels, they're very visible. And you see touring and you see these snippets of the industry, and there's so much more that goes on beyond, kind of behind the scenes.
Glamorous.
Well, exactly. And it's really, you just don't understand the huge network of people that are involved to make anything happen. So my professor said, you should kind of look into this world, and I didn't, because I didn't.
You just didn't care to, you didn't know about it.
Well, it was one of those things. I'm like, yeah, that'd be cool, but never kind of put two together. Yeah. And then when I finished my university degree, came to Toronto, went to Harris Institute, and kind of as I got there, realized, no, that's what I'm passionate about. Like, it all kind of clicked in my love for the industry and the business side, my love for music and discovery, my love of television, all kind of merges in music supervision. So I went to Harris very much with the intention of learning about the industry as a whole, but with a singular focus that sync and supervision was where I wanted to kind of move through that process. And luckily enough, Harris Institute is located literally around the corner from where our Vapor Music office used to be. So in I think it was my second or third term, I had Fridays off, I had a few mornings off, and it's like, let's see if I can intern somewhere on those couple days. Found Vapor, and it's a hop, skip, and a jump away. We're not in that space anymore, but at the time, it was incredibly convenient. Reached out, was lucky enough to have the music supervisors at the company at the time bring me in, take me on as an intern, and I have essentially not left the company since then.
Yeah, I noticed when I was doing research on you, I'm like, you have worked your way up.
It's interesting because I feel like that doesn't happen a lot nowadays. I don't feel
people
like
people
flighty, people move around.
Yeah.
And especially in music and in sync, where you're kind of carving your own path. But I had a lot of really cool opportunities through Vapor and through the team, and it's an amazing team of people.
That's what I assumed. I'm like, to stay at a company for that long, I'm like, it's got to be a great team, and you must love the people, and they love you too.
It's a fantastic team. We do a lot of really great stuff, and I mean, assuming kind of anyone who's listening doesn't know a ton about Vapor, we are a full-service audio company located in Toronto and Vancouver. In Toronto, we now have 5 studios. So we've got a space with 5 studios, including a Dolby Atmos room.
Sick.
So we handle everything from music supervision and licensing, which is myself and my colleague Taylan Wong, and we're a small but mighty team handling that world. But we also do original composition and sound design and full studio services, mixes, and dialogue records. Ton of work in kids TV and animation, a ton of work in advertising, and then across the full gamut of things on the music supervision side. So it's really cool to be both a fully functioning licensing team, but also a very small part of the entire audio post process and getting to work with some incredibly talented people every single day. We recently rebranded our long format film TV side into Long Division. So it's taking everything we've always done in the film and television space, but giving its own brand identity to it, which has been really cool because I find film TV clients want to know you specialize in that world, and advertising clients want to know that you specialize in that world.
And they
it's
can
hard,
trust you.
Exactly, and it's hard for somebody to necessarily see the kind of crossover of the skills for both. So this kind of really lets us showcase our work on both sides. And we have certain team members who work in one side or the other side and others who kind of float between both. But it really lets us show our love for both sides, which is really cool and very exciting. So that's been a really fun thing this year, is launching Long Division and getting to be a part of that process.
So you've had a lot of really cool moments in your career. You won Best Sync in 2022 with your work in President's Choice's Eat Together campaign.
Yeah.
And then you were nominated 2 more times for advertising and comedy soundtracks. What are some of your other most favorite moments in your career?
Oh, man, there's so many really cool things, and some are tangible like that, where it's getting recognized for work you do, which is really cool. And the Sync Awards especially are really exciting because they're something that the Canadian music supervision industry puts on through our Guild of Music Supervisors Canada, and I sit on the board for that, and I'm on the Sync Awards committee. So getting to really honor our colleagues for doing this work is really cool, because it's not something that happens very often. There's really no other category or award that focuses on music supervision in Canada. We don't have the equivalent of what they have with the Emmy in the States. So it's cool to be able to see all your colleagues and the people you work with and the sync reps and labels and publishers.
Yes.
So that's always very exciting.
Yes.
Other really cool moments. This fall we had a really, really cool one. We worked on a film called Hell of a Summer, which is Finn Wolfhard from Stranger Things and his co-director Billy Brick, who's also an actor and a director. It's their feature directorial debut. It's a teen horror slasher comedy, hilarious, super fun, ton of fun to work on, but it premiered at TIFF this year. So we got to go to the premiere, and we were sitting the row in front of the entire cast, most of whom I'm assuming haven't seen the entirety of the film before. So listening to their reactions as things happened, and listening to them cheer each other on when one of them walked into the scene, and it was so much fun. It was a Midnight Madness premiere, which is fun anyway because Midnight Madness crowds are hilarious, and there's a whole culture to it that I didn't even know existed.
Because this is comedy.
It's
so
comedy, but it's
exactly,
but it's also horror and slasher. There's a lot of blood and a lot of murder.
Yeah.
But it's funny and it's fun, and it's just such a community to it. But being able to hear the cast's reactions and hear them get to celebrate this achievement of theirs, especially in the middle of the writer and actors strike, where they were given the special permission to be able to participate in TIFF as an independent film. So it was just a really joyous moment to get to participate in that. And I feel like in licensing, you've got your head down, you've got your headphones on, you're working through something. It can be a very singular experience. So getting to celebrate it in a theater filled with other people who love film is really exciting.
Do you have any steps for musicians that want to get into sync?
I think there's a few sides to it. I think, first of all, more than anything else is to work on your music. And I find that we are in a really cool era right now where there's so much music.
Yes.
It's an overwhelming amount of music. So there's...
Especially since the pandemic. I feel like everyone took up music and everyone has access at home.
And it's access. That's the big thing, is that even 10 years ago, it wasn't as easy for someone to pop open their computer and just make something. You've got the emergence of that technology in somebody's phone nowadays. It's not even their computer. You can, in this tiny little device you can fit in your pocket, you can create entire songs.
Have you heard about like the Steve Lacy album?
A little bit, yeah.
Like he made his whole emerging album on his mobile GarageBand app, and I'm like, it sounds amazing though.
So the fact that cost limitation, it used to be hundreds of thousands of dollars to record an album. Now you can do it on a device you already have. Of course, it's not always going to be perfect. It's not going to be great, but the barrier to entry has been reduced, which is really cool. But it means there's a ton of music, and it's overwhelming for anybody who is receiving music as part of their job, let alone an average listener who's just trying to discover what they love. But in terms of, as an artist, you making your music stand out it's hard. It's hard right now because there's a lot of it. It's not like if you were signed to one of the few majors, then that's what everyone would hear. There's so many avenues for music discovery. So on our end, before we can do anything with your music, we have to know it exists. So to an artist, I would say practice your craft, work hard on it, create the truest representation of yourself and your art, and do it really well. And I do feel that the best music does rise up. That doesn't mean you have to sign to a major label and get worldwide PR. That's not it at all. But word of mouth, I'm far more likely to listen to an artist if someone I trust says, Heather, you have to listen to this person. They are so great. Listen to this song. Love the harmonies here. Love this. And that's what, more than anything else, will get me to listen to something right away. So doing something so that you're getting that little bit of a buzz through trusted networks is absolutely how you're going to start getting people's attention.
Totally. And like, I start this podcast with kind of like, if you make great music, you could be making money, but great is subjective. And I think like, as long as you know that like by the time you're done the song, you're like, this is a good song, then you're doing something right. Because like, you need to, like, building on what you were saying, it's like, you know, dial in on what you know you're good at and what like sets your heart on fire, because like supervisors will be able to hear that too.
Well, and that's it. And there's absolutely technical things, and we can chat about that in a second, that will increase your chances and help you to make sure if you get that opportunity, you can capitalize on it. But in terms of getting the opportunity in the first place, you have to have great music. There's too much music for your music to not be great. And of course, great is subjective. Great for one project I'm working on could be completely different than great for something else. And that's not even just genre. That could be production style. It could be era, genre, all of lyrics, any of those things. Something I could listen to for one project could be a horrible pick for that project, but fantastic for something else. And that's the really great thing about content creation right now, film and television and short form web series and digital media and gaming and indie games, that with the ability to create so much content and so many channels of distribution, we're not limited to the 5 shows that CTV can put out every year, which are phenomenal in using great music and are super exciting, but are going to be more mainstream. But now we have specialty channels, we have streaming services, we've got YouTube, we've got people releasing their own thing, we've got short form series on CBC Gem and on Crave and on any number of networks. That can be experimental, that can be weird, that can be different, we worked on one show many years back that was entirely heavy metal music. And these are the things you're not going to get at 8 o'clock on a primetime network. It's just not going to happen. But being nowadays, you're able to use all of these different things on anything, on all these different opportunities. So there really is a spot for everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so as an artist, it's not about I'm going to create music that sounds sync friendly, because that is a skill that very few people can do well. And if you're somebody who can write in different genres and make something that checks all these boxes feel authentic, then that is a wonderful skill set. And I give that person so much power, because it's really, really, really difficult to do. But for most artists, hone in on your sound. Figure out what feels authentically you, what you can do really well that stays true to you and you're creative, and what feels true and authentic and shares your heart with the world. And then figure out where that fits, whether that's genre, whether it's style. And the great thing is everything is on the internet now. So you can find out, okay, Heather worked on Robin Hood. What else is she working on? You can pull up IMDb. Anything that we are allowed to talk about is on there. Because like anybody else, we are trying to get new projects and new work. We're always looking for the next opportunity. So we're trying to promote what we do as well. We're not quiet about the projects that we work on unless we can't talk about it yet, which absolutely happens too. But we're proud of the work we do and really excited about it. So we're going to talk about it as best we can. So if you go on my IMDb page, it lists projects that we're working on right now. And if somebody were to reach out to me and say, hey, I see you're working on this film called Young Werther. I don't know what the music's going to sound like yet, but I read up a little bit on the book that it's based on. Here's a few songs that I think could work. Even if those songs are nothing like what we're looking for, I'm going to be far more likely to listen and read that email, because somebody took
The time.
5 minutes of effort to try and tailor a pitch. It's a lot easier when it's like season 2 of a show, then you've got an established sound that you can kind of pitch based on.
Right.
But tailoring and treating the person you're emailing as a person is so important. I can't tell you the number of emails I've received where I'm one of, I'm sure, hundreds of people BCC'd. Dear music supervisor, I am the greatest musician ever. Here is my, and then give like a Spotify link, or they attach 4 WAV files to the email. And like a little personal touch really goes a long way when talking to anybody. Really doesn't matter who they are. But start your email with, hi Heather, how you doing?
Yeah.
A quick, I caught last week's episode of Robin Hood, loved the use of insert song name here, because of course we're talking about that too. Easy information to find.
Yes.
My music is also in this genre. Wanted to send it your way.
Yeah.
And I think the most important thing an artist can do is then, once their music is figured out, once they're proud of their product, is get all of their ducks in a row in terms of the admin side. Because you can have the greatest song in the entire world, but if I can't license it, it just doesn't matter.
Yeah, if it's not easy for you, then it's like you're not going to put in the work to figure it out.
Well, and even if it's difficult, if I don't have that information, I can't figure it out.
Right.
So if when you send me your music, it comes up as track 1, track 2, track 3 with no artist information, and I can't Shazam it or all that, like, I'm not going to go and try and like track down where did this random Dropbox link come from. It's just we have way too many other things to do.
Yeah.
So metadata is huge, making sure that if you're sending music to somebody, if you have the opportunity to send music to somebody, you're doing it in a way that's respectful of someone's time. You do it through a service that is easy to use. I always recommend Disco, which is the industry standard in the sync and music supervision world at this point. They are a phenomenal service. They have multiple budget tier points depending on if you're an independent artist, if you're a label, if you're a music supervisor. But an independent artist can spend, I think it's like $10 or $12 a month or something like that to get an artist page where you can upload your entire repertoire. You can easily send it. Can put all your metadata in, so clearly it says who wrote the song, if there's other parties involved, who has this. Let's say you wrote with a co-writer who's on Sony Publishing. You can indicate that there so that we're not in a situation where it gets pitched at an indie price point, then all of a sudden we're running into challenges because you wrote with a major co-writer that was never disclosed. So there's all of that, and we of course do our due diligence and do as much research as we can, but especially when working with artists direct and indie artists, we are very reliant on the information we are given at the beginning before we get into contracts and cue sheets. If somebody hasn't registered their songs properly on SOCAN, it's hard for us to double check that all the writers are who they say they are. So the industry operates on a little bit of trust. You are signing contracts that indemnify that you represent all the rights. They indemnify that there is no copyright claims against the song. You haven't ripped somebody else off. I need someone to be upfront about samples, about co-writers, about anything.
Just disclose everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'd rather know too much.
Yeah.
And then be able to plan accordingly for it.
Yes, rather than be surprised.
Exactly. And the thing is, all of those things are doable.
Yeah, and there's like literally on Disco like places to input this
Absolutely.
information. Like you put your PRO, you put what the split is, you put your lyrics, you put the BPM, the whatever samples, like that's all.
And if we love a song, yeah, I'll jump through the hoops to clear the sample. I'll do whatever.
Yeah.
But if it's between that song and another song that we love equally, and one is easy to clear, one has got all of those ducks figured out, the other one doesn't know where their sample came from. They're like, I think we might have put a sample in here, but I don't know what it is or where it came from. We just kind of grabbed it off YouTube. And so if somebody just doesn't have that information aligned, we just don't usually have the time or the ability to solve those problems that they should have solved themselves.
I heard that certain samples are easier to clear than others. Like, for example, like drum one-shots and drum loops. Like, if you use them, it's better than using, like, melodic loops.
I mean, any part of something that is not yours is a sample. And it still needs to be cleared, regardless of what it is. I think a lot of it is just the simple fact that you are using someone else's copyright, and that could be a melody, of course. It could be something in the production. It could be an instrumental something. But if you are taking somebody else's copywritten work, you have to disclose it and have that conversation. The best thing you can do if you are using a sample is to have that conversation with that copyright owner in advance and determine what those splits would be in the case of a license. So if there's a sample, but you and the publisher have determined, all right, we're going to split publishing 50-50. Let's say it's an interpolation and not a sample, so you're not using the original master recording, but rather you recreated, let's say, a melodic element of another song. So let's say there's no share on the master, but you've decided, okay, we're going to give them 50% of the publishing, and that's what they've agreed to. And if we want to use the song, it's a split. We can have that conversation, we can clear it. But if those conversations haven't happened behind the scenes, then we have to get everybody to agree not only to the use, but to what that percentage split is. And that's just not something that happens in the 48 hours we might have to clear a song. It's just, it's a longer process than that. It's not impossible, but it is a longer conversation. So anything you can do, or unless, my kind of rule on sampling is unless it creatively enhances your work to the point that you cannot use it, if it is the driving creative force, then absolutely use the sample that you're called to use. But don't expect that your income based on that song will be in licensing.
I see. Okay.
Unless you're like Drake.
Yeah.
And then you already have a budget that's substantial enough.
Yes, and you can cover it.
And then you're going to be able to cover it. You're going to be able to figure it out.
Yeah.
But if you're an indie artist who then, let's say you sample Drake, I don't have a Drake budget if I'm clearing you.
Yeah, that's just problematic at that point. Are there any green flags for when people reach out to you that kind of make people stand out, other than like kind of tailoring?
Yeah, I mean, use my name is a great green flag. Hi, Heather. Not, hi, music supervisor, or hey there, or any of those things. I mean, anything that shows that you're writing an email to a person. I don't care if it's a copy-pasted email you've sent to 100 people. Just send them as 100 different emails and replace someone's name and their company, and make sure that when you press send, everything in your text doesn't turn purple like Gmail likes to do when you've copy pasted something in. Like, that little bit of effort really goes a long way. Absolutely. And just being a kind human being. And I think in the music industry, we're all so grateful for any opportunity that we're given that we kind of forget at a certain point that kindness needs to come first. Everybody's hungry, everybody's trying to take what they can, everybody's trying to hustle and reach out and talk about how great you are so you can get that opportunity. But a lot can be said for just being kind
and being human.
Being kind and being human, and realizing the person at the other side of that inbox is human too. And there is a lot to be said for just saying, hi, how's it going? This is who I am. This is what I do. Here's this. as opposed to, I am the greatest musician that's ever. I have to find some of these because they're hilarious. But you can be proud of what you do, and you can be confident in your abilities without being boastful. You can explain who you are and your essence as an artist without coming across as insincere. And I think a lot of it's anything you would do when you try and build a relationship with anybody. You have to remember that this is a relationship.
It needs to be genuine.
It needs to be genuine, and a music supervisor may not have a project that your music works for right now, or they might, and you are one of thousands of songs that gets listened to for that project, and maybe 30 get chosen. That the producer's kid's best friend may have listened to your song and hated it. So you don't know who's in that room and who's making those decisions and who's involved. But being gracious and humble and kind and not following up every 24 hours and like, how can you send me detailed feedback on the 10 songs I sent you? You just have to be respectful of people's time. And realistically, I want to work with good people. At the end of the day, if I'm sending you an email, I want to know that you're going to be kind. If I need to call you, if we need to change terms last minute, that I'm not going to like feel your eye roll through the telephone when I have to like. It's a really detailed industry. Things change at last minute, terms change, songs get removed in the final mix. And it can be a really disappointing industry when you've gotten to that very end line. It's you and one other song, and they choose the other one for whatever that reason is. It might not be a good reason. Then you see it on air, and it's not your song, and you're super bummed about it. And I get that. I completely get it. But I think it's a long-term game that you're playing when you're trying to get into sync. You're trying to build relationships with music supervisors. And if you're a kind person who makes great music, I'm going to want to use your music. And that might be 5 years down the road. And then I'm going to jump up and down because I'm so excited that we finally found something that we could put your music into.
I think gamifying it helps as well. Instead of taking it super personally of like, oh, like, they didn't like me. It's just like, okay, well, on to the next one.
And it's never about not liking you. It's not about liking or not liking a song.
It's just fit.
It's never about the song. It's about the scene. And if the scene becomes about the song, unless it is meant to be about the song, then you've not done a great job. That song has to support the scene, not the other way around. So it may be an amazing song. It may be perfect, but your vocal tone may be at a level that just competes with the lead actress's dialogue enough that it doesn't work. That has nothing to do with how great the song is. It can be a phenomenal song. It just doesn't work in that moment. Or the scene is 3 minutes and 28 seconds and your song is 2.5 minutes, and we couldn't find a way to loop things appropriately to hit the moments we needed to. Again, not your song's fault. That's the song. And it just didn't work in that moment.
That's good advice for listeners, because I think like I know when I first started getting into sync, it is a little bit disappointing.
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
it's just disappointing. Like you see a dollar amount, you see like a cool
and you
opportunity,
get excited,
you start planning on like, oh, I can promote this on this will help me do.
And you start imagining all these things, but it's like, there's no point in thinking of it like that though. It's kind of just like, just make the music, and if you find a home for it, that's amazing. And if not, like you'll probably find another home for it.
And we are always actively looking for homes for songs we love. But that doesn't mean that I get to sync my favorite tracks every day. There's so many tracks that I love that I've never gotten an opportunity just because it hasn't aligned. The genre didn't work. The budget wasn't right. The director hated that artist. Like there's so many things that have to fall into place. It really is a needle in a haystack for it all to align. Every sync is a miracle at the end of the day that you were able to get that many people to come to a decision and agree on something. So you can't take it personally. Unless you like legitimately didn't disclose something.
Unless it's your fault.
Unless it's your own fault, which happens on occasion. But if you've done all these other things and you've prepared everything and it's just a creative choice, then you can't get mad about a creative choice. You can be disappointed. I feel like I'm talking to my children here. I'm just like, you can be disappointed, but don't throw a temper tantrum.
Everything's going to be okay.
It'll all be fine. There'll be another opportunity. And you know what?
Yeah.
those are the ones that we try and find another opportunity for. If it's a song we love and we were super excited and it went another way at the last minute, I am going to be actively trying to find another home for that artist because I want to be a part of that story.
Like you were trying to sell it in the first place. Like
Exactly. We believe in the song.
Yeah.
We don't put things forward that we don't think is a great creative fit.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You don't want to waste your own time.
No.
Like, yeah.
And we want to be champions for artists. Music supervision is a weird industry because we are in the music industry, but we're not. We're very much more in the film TV industry. Our job is to support that side of it. And we get to use music to do that. But we're not actively involved in artists' careers. We're not building those careers. We don't get to provide feedback on this, and we're not a part of the creation process. When we get a song, usually it's done. There's weird exceptions where you get something and they're like, hey, this is still editable. If you want us to add something, we could. And that's fun and cool when that happens. But usually our timelines don't allow for it anyway. But our job is to support production. Number one will always be to support production, is to make that film, that TV show, that ad do what it needs to do creatively.
Okay.
So it's about the song, but it's not about the song.
So it's not an often scenario where you have a song that's almost the right fit. So then you go back to the artist and say, hey, can you actually add piano instead of blah, blah, blah?
It's very rare we'd have the time to do it.
I see.
Occasionally,
Yeah.
it might happen, but that relies on many things falling into place. It relies on an artist who has a home studio who can make something happen fast. It relies on them going back into a usually completely finished mix and playing with it. And usually it's timeline. Usually we are clearing things in short amounts of time and we're trying to make it all happen. And also you have kind of, when you're not dealing necessarily with people directly in the music industry, visualization can be a challenge. So we may pitch a song to a team and say, hey, but we could do this with it. And it's hard for someone who's not in music to imagine what that could sound like. They're like, okay, yeah, we could make this song a cover, but what would that cover sound like? And they still hear it the way they hear it. So often you're just not, it's really hard to pitch something that isn't existing.
Okay.
Because you are taking a risk on imagining what it could sound like. So if you're somebody who works in music, if you're somebody whose brain kind of works that way, then yeah, you may be like, yeah, this would sound great with piano. But somebody else who's in business affairs, who doesn't have a music mind, they know what they like, and they may have really great taste, but may hear something and be like, I don't know, what would it sound like with piano? We'd have to hear it with piano to know what it would sound like. And
I see. So instead of investing all that time and energy into recreating it, it's just like you don't know that that's going to get placed even if
exactly.
you change a
And just you don't know that the time's going to allow for it. I always really recommend people, you finish your songs in the way that seems true to you, the way that feels right. We may ask for stems. I think we're more likely to remove something than add something. So we might, let's say we want to use something and someone's like, I really don't like that tambourine there. Can we get the stems and remove the tambourine?
I see.
That can absolutely happen. Or that whistly thing you've got in your mix is, again, competing with dialogue here. Can we dip that out during that part and then bring it back later? So there's lots of things we can do in a mix to play with things, and that's nice. But chances are we just don't have the timeline to be able to really go in and edit things. And that's why if we're sent demos, if we're sent things that don't feel like they're sonically there, we usually can't use them. And that's not to say somebody can't have an incredible sounding demo, and that's absolutely usable. But the audio quality of anything that we can use, this is going to end up on television. It's going to end up in a movie theater. It's going to end up...
High fidelity is
exactly.
important.
It has to sound like something that would air on the radio. The quality has to be there because it's going to be mixed in a very expensively mixed final project. It has to sound good. So if everything sounds muddy, if it's a rough vocal take, if it's that, it's not going to work because everything else that surrounds it is crisp and is clean and is perfect.
Right.
And that's not to say record and mix something in a style that's not the way you're interpreting your music, because there is so much music now that isn't pristine, your vocals aren't completely up front, but it still needs to sound good and it still needs to be mixed well, and it needs to be usually mastered. Like often if we're mixing it into something, that's the one area we might be able to futz with it a little bit because we're going to be doing our own final mix on it. But it needs to be a finished product or a really, really, really good demo.
Yeah, and that kind of ties back into what we were talking about before with steps that musicians can take to give them a better chance at landing sync deals. It's like, yeah, make music that's awesome, research your supervisors, and then also make sure like the quality's good as it can be.
Yeah, sonically, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's so important. And as we were talking about with access to technology, it's not this big daunting thing that it used to be. There's lots of people who, if you don't think your mixing skills are up to par, you can hire somebody at many different levels to mix, go to get someone to master. It's important that it sounds good.
And there's so much education out there too.
Absolutely.
Like there's tons of mixing courses and mastering courses. YouTube Academy isn't that bad when you're first starting, just to like get your feet wet.
And then we always have an instrumental version of everything. And I mean, those are the technical things that there's a list of things that need to be done. So yes, have it sound great sonically, have an instrumental version that is mixed the exact same way as the vocal, because often we will weave in and out of the vocal and the instrumental. So we might do the instrumental part under dialogue so that there aren't lyrics while people are talking. Then they have their moment and we bring the vocals in through the end of the scene. So there's so many ways that we play with that. So having an instrumental is integral. Some people will create what's called a TV mix. So that is taking out any worded vocals, but having like backgrounds, keeping that in. Sometimes there'll be versions that take out the vocal lyrics but just do the vocal lyrics in the verses but just do the choruses. So there's so many ways that you can do versions. Some people will do cut down versions, which isn't necessary because a lot of places will do that edit themselves.
Okay.
But there's so many ways to technically just have things ready. If your track is explicit, having a clean version is so important.
Just make it easy to manipulate.
Exactly.
Much, yeah.
Have all the options there, because you don't want to be have this opportunity on the table. But let's say the program's rated PG, and there's just one lyric that we can't do a convincing edit around.
You are such a wealth of knowledge. Also, I'm like sitting here like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. Is there anything you want to say before we wrap up this episode? We've covered a lot of cool topics that I think are useful.
I mean, I think, and we kind of keep coming back to it, is that it's great if you can make a career in sync, but I think as an artist, it needs to be something you do with your creative output and not something that drives your creative output. If you are a writer who's incredibly versatile, some people can make an incredible career off of writing for sync. But there aren't very many of those people who exist in the way that can do it authentically and make every song they create sound like it was off of their own personal album and from their heart, and not sound like, oh, I followed this formula.
Right.
And when it works, when you can create a song that's a sync song, for lack of a better word, that feels real and authentic, it's so exciting because when you're able to hit all of those brief elements. But not a lot of people can do it. It's not an easy skill, and that's why it's so in demand, because it's not something that's easy to do.
Yeah.
So for most artists, my recommendation is find your voice. Figure out what that is and what calls to you and what feels authentic to your soul as a musician. You're a musician because you have something to say. So say that. Say what your heart is calling you to say in your music. Sound the way your heart is calling you to sound, not because you need A plus B here, and then you need to hit the bridge, and then you need to modulate, and then you need to make sure you drop the beat out.
Yeah.
And sure, those are all things that make a song sync worthy.
Yeah.
But they may not be you.
Yeah.
So those things have to merge. They absolutely have to merge together. And if sync friendly and authentic to yourself overlap, amazing. That's great.
Right.
Super cool. And yes, it will probably have more opportunities due to the nature of what works to picture and what builds emotion. But that doesn't mean that something created in your bedroom by yourself, spilling your guts out, is going to be less emotionally impactful. It just means it was coming from your heart and not trying to follow a formula.
So passion over everything.
Yeah. And if passion can then equal commerce, amazing. I'm never going to say no to being able to give someone money.
Yes.
More than anything, what makes me excited is being able to bring independent artists opportunities. On Robin Hood, we had a couple of artists that I didn't realize at the time, but it was their first sync ever that they received. And then when the show aired, they posted about it on social media saying, like, this is my first sync. A really great West Coast artist named Taeyeon Gibbs. We licensed a song translation with I'm the Living, and it's an incredible song, and did not realize that was their first sync. And then an artist, Fernie from Montreal, who just signed with Secret City. Incredible artist as well, and somebody who's kind of become one of my favorites over the last year or so, and didn't realize it was their first sync either. So like that feels really cool.
That you can be that
like,
stepping stone.
That's kind of the most rewarding part of all of this. On the music side is being able to know that that sync meant something to someone's career. Like the Beatles don't need another sync. When it creatively works, it's incredibly satisfying for us to use a big name song to merge it all together. But that's satisfying for a different reason. It's satisfying because of the beauty of syncing music and picture and what that kind of turns into. But the complete other side is being able to have a role in an artist's career, which we don't on a daily basis. Like we're not a manager, we're not a label, we're not an artist, we're not in the gritty kind of nitty gritty of someone's career. So when we get to have an impact on that career, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. You're changing people's lives one life at a time.
One paycheck at a time.
And where can people find you?
So we are online at vapormusic.com and longdivision.tv. If you're interested in knowing kind of more about what we do, Vapor Music is the advertising side, so any of our ad work is up there. And then Long Division is the film TV side, and those sites will cover all of our disciplines, so music supervision, but also all of the other amazing things that our incredibly talented team works on. Me personally, you can find me on various spaces in the internet.
You're pretty active on social media. It's awesome.
I try. I'm not very good at it, but I try. It's one of those things that we've had a really exciting year. We've had a lot of great projects premiere, and I'm really excited about them, and I want people to know that they're out there and that they exist. And so have been trying. So I'm on Instagram at Heather Adamo, Adamo. That's my personal one. But also we are on Instagram as at Vapor Music and at Long Division. I think it's .tv there as well. So if you want to follow any of our companies or myself, we're on there. It's really the only social network I use because I'm not cool enough for TikTok.
You are cool enough. Everyone's cool enough for TikTok.
But I tried, and then I fall into some like rabbit hole of like procedural, like, you know, they cut up the procedural videos into like 10-minute increments, and you get like just a little bit of the story of whatever the hospital drama is. I'm like, I just need to see more, and then it's been 3 hours.
Yeah, you're in
so
a
that's
rabbit
why
hole.
I stay off TikTok.
Thanks so much for being here,
No,
Heather.
thank
I really
you for
appreciate
having me.
it. Thank you guys for listening. Don't forget to follow Selling the Soundtrack on socials. We're on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. Thanks so much, guys. Bye.
Bye.